Hello everyone, and welcome to this 6th video in our series on Leela's opening repertoire. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and I'm pretty sure that Mr. Beads, Leela's greatest fan, is going to be pretty excited about this video, because if there's one thing he likes even more than Leela games, it's Leela games in the Semi-Slav. So what does Leela think about that? Well, let's have a look. So after d4, d5, c4, e6, let's have a look first of all at knight f3. And actually you really have to prod Leela to look at the Semi-Slav, because normally Leela's just going for knight f6, knight c3, and we'll play, for example, bishop b4 going into the Ragozin. That's actually slightly different from what's happening at the chess event at the TCEC just now. But I think that's probably maybe something due to slightly lower depths. Maybe Leela wants the Semi-Slav at slightly lower depths, but at higher depths doesn't. In any case, I haven't seen it on my setup anyway. So after c6, the very interesting thing here is that for a long time, engines always wanted to play bishop g5, either go for the Botvinnik or the anti-Moscow Gambit, which we'll have a look at a little bit later. But actually, all of the engines now seem to essentially have basically calculated this out, decided that bishop g5 is not promising enough for an advantage, and they're all playing e3, knight bd7, and then queen c2. And it's quite interesting. I mean, AlphaZero played 5 bishop g5 mostly, but there are also a few games with queen c2. So it was obviously in there as one of its main continuations. But yeah, just with modern engines, the emphasis seems to have switched. Queen c2 is preferred above bishop g5. What's Leela's main line here? Bishop d6, bishop d3, d takes c4, bishop takes c4. Castles, a6, rook d1, b5, all big mainline theory. And now the move knight g5, so hitting h7 and also looking to come around to e4 to try and get some grip on c5. h6, knight e4, bishop b8, b4. a5 takes, queen a5, bishop d2, queen c7, g3, rook c8. Now Leela's novelty is rook c1 here. Which is 0.11 evaluation at the end, but obviously still quite a complicated game. I mean, black can get in c5 and it's great. If black doesn't, then white's going to end up having a bind there. But the queen c2 Semi-Slav, that's basically what Leela's preferring. Now there's also something quite interesting in here, because instead of knight bd7, which is the main line, we've been seeing bishop d6 a lot from Leela. We saw it in the Engine World Championships, and we've also seen it in a couple of games against Winter and against Scorpio, I think. In this bonus event, Leela beat Winter and drew with Scorpio. So bishop d3, takes, b5. I mean, from my point of view, pre-computer age, this looks so amateurish. You never developed this bishop early to d6, and certainly if you played the bishop to d6 early, you didn't play d takes c4 and b5. But what do we know? Bishop d3 is Leela's main line. Bishop b3 was played both by Scorpio and by Winter. Bishop a6. I mean, Winter played knight g5, b4, which was a little bit risky. I mean, I think knight e4 was played now, and white isn't able to castle, but white is making a start against the c6 pawn. But actually Leela just sacked it and got a very good game and won a fine game. Scorpio played castles, b4, knight e2, and had a reasonable advantage, but nothing too scary, and Leela managed to draw that without too much difficulty. But yeah, definitely an interesting line. I'm not 100% clear as to what the total value of that is. What the difference is between knight bd7 and b5. Whether what the move order actually means. But yeah, I mean, Leela's been playing it an awful lot, so obviously there's something quite interesting to it. So that's quite unexpected. Let's have a look at bishop g5, which is always the nice main line. Now the interesting thing is that against d takes c4, The Botvinnik system, Leela again, after a lot of thinking, it looks at an awful lot of different things, but eventually it settles for Komodo's line and also for Stockfish's line, which is this old Semi-Slav variation. Was supposed to be not that great in my day, but Leela and Komodo and Stockfish all consider this to be perfectly fine for black, and well, who are we to argue with these? There was a game, Gukesh against Erigaisi, Camp 4 2022. So pretty clear that that the Indian juniors are looking at this, and yeah, I mean, we follow a game, Tomaszewski against Idani, Krasnaya Polyana 2021 up till move 31, and then Leela's got this novelty knight d2, and there we are. So well, take a look at the PGN if you're interested in that. Very long, complicated variations, but yeah, a lot of correspondence games behind them, and yeah, it just seems that this variation, bishop e7, is way simpler than the knight bd7 lines that have just been like mainstream for the past 20 years. The other idea that black's got is to go h6, and this is very interesting as well, because it was Leela has the same reaction as Stockfish. So AlphaZero was more or less always playing bishop h4, heading into the anti-Moscow Gambit, but Leela also wants to play bishop f6, queen f6, e3, bishop d3, and just play this position. To be honest, this is not that much. I mean, it's supposed to be a slight advantage for white, this. You know, your light squared bishop is maybe a bit better than the dark squared bishop. You've got light square pressure, but yeah, I don't know. I think you'd have to be an amazing technician to make anything of this, and obviously you're not going to succeed against an engine. Knight d1 was Leela's move with a 0.07 advantage, so you can see that Leela doesn't particularly believe in this bishop g5 line. Bishop h4 is a lot sharper, and yeah, I mean, for a long time actually, Leela's looking at the AlphaZero approach, which is h4, which was exceptionally dangerous. There's a huge amount of analysis on that in my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. I mean, things have been found to sort of give black some parity, but you know, it was a very, very nice idea from AlphaZero. What Leela's going for is also, I think, a line that Stockfish was quite keen on, just castling quietly. Bishop g7 takes, bishop d6, a6, a4, bishop f8 takes, e5, c5. Yeah, and it's just one of those typical things, really, that, you know, black's got well, not a great king, and the king side is open, but black's play is so strong centrally. You know, this pawns on d4 and e5 are being removed, and yeah, what's left basically is just not good enough. cd, rook e1, king e7, rook d8, and well, this is well known from an email game, and now queen a1 is Leela's move, but yeah, I don't think it's very much at all. King f6, queen g3, and well, Leela gives a 0.03 advantage. Obviously, as always, there's some nifty tactics just to keep black afloat, but once those are passed, you know, then black's doing absolutely fine. So that's bishop g5, and that's probably the reason why, you know, Leela doesn't like it and thinks there's more chances of playing with the queen c2 Meran rather than the most aggressive lines. Now, we've actually seen this line through a slightly strange move order. Leela's been playing d4, knight f6, c4, c6, and then playing d5 the move after. Well, it's no surprise actually to see that Leela likes the Exchange Slav, because we saw this at the World Computer Championships, and we've been seeing the Exchange Slav a lot in this TCEC bonus, where Leela, Komodo and Stockfish play the starting position against all sorts of engines. Yeah, I mean, it is a nice idea. I mean, it's been popular for white ever since Botvinnik and Makoganov in the 1940s got to grips with it and found a lot of very interesting ideas. Makoganov in particular is worth seeing, looking at a few of these games from this exceptionally strong player, not so well known, because he played a couple of beautiful ones. But yeah, this is the main line. You give little checks just to disrupt the black position, try and stop the light squared bishop from getting out of play. Knight h5, bishop e5, f6. We're still heavily into theory here. Bishop g3, bishop b4, castles, takes, knight c4, rook c1, knight d6. And well, we're still following a game here. This is Stremavicius against Nasuta, Levnica 2022. And well, knight d2 was played in that game. Queen b3 is Leela's move. Queen b6, knight e2, king e7. I mean, white's got a slight advantage again. These black pieces are slightly awkward, but black's got the two bishops. I mean, Leela thinks that black can just give up this h7 pawn, swap off the queens, and just play this ending a pawn down with the two bishops. And yeah, pretty active pieces. Should probably be fine, but yeah, I mean, I think definitely the Exchange Slav is worth looking at because yeah, a lot of interesting, well, a lot of engines playing this, and yeah, it is a much more dangerous line than something like the Exchange French, for example. So if we go back into more traditional Slavs, we've got knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, d takes c4, a4, and now Leela, I think just like Stockfish or Koivisto as well, doesn't want to play the line bishop f5, just wants to play this line e6, and after e3 we go c5, and it's just a Queen's Gambit accepted, where white's played this extra move a4, which may or may not be an advantage, because after all, here you can just play a simple plan with knight c6, and your knight's guaranteed a square on b4. So queen e2, bishop e7, castles, castles, rook d1, knight b4, bishop g5. We're following a game here, Nakamura against Schwidler, Moscow 2016, and Schwidler played b6, which is pretty reasonable. Leela wants bishop d7 and just considers that this is the best line for white. Yeah, the normal slight engine advantage, an extra pawn for white, but difficult to hold the a5 and b2 pawns, and black's active. With a bit of accuracy, black's fine. This is the main line, and pawns are being picked up. And yeah, this is a slight advantage for white. You pick up the a pawn, but yeah, it's just actually a draw. Leela's very comfortable with these 0.16. So definitely an interesting idea. This e6, you know, not at all stupid. We've got some other ideas here. Instead of d takes c4, we could also play a6, which was very popular when I was professional. Was actually mainly due to Grandmaster Julian Hodgson, colleague of mine, who he just discovered all sorts of nice things. That, for example, if you play a move like e3, bishop f5, queen b3, he wasn't playing b5, he was playing rook a7, and just waiting there, and then when the queen moves away, he was moving his rook back into play, which is quite typical of his sense of humour, but turned out to be a very interesting idea. But after a6, Leela wants to play c5, knight d7, bishop f4, which is well, you know, the most principled way of dealing with this system. I mean, you play a6, so let's start trying to attack the dark squares. And I remember that Leela had played a great game against Stockfish in one of the super finals. I think, was it maybe c5, bishop g4 that Jeroen had specified? A slightly second-rate move from black, but yeah, Leela defended very well as black and then played a super game as white. So knight f6 is Leela's idea. Rook c1, e5. We're still following quite a bit of theory here. Knight a4, knight e5, bishop c3. And we're following a game Topalov against Bakro. Bakro played f6 in this position. Leela wants queen e7, knight b6, rook b8. I mean, basically white's going to get the bishop pair here, and then Leela wants to open up the centre with e4. It's 0.18 at the end. That's Leela's assessment. But yeah, the lines are quite sharp, quite involved, and black needs to play really well. So there's also a piece sacrifice involved as well. I'll just show you the main line quickly. Obviously not EF, because knight somewhere discovered check will be mate. Queen b2, bishop f4, bishop b2, g3. The bishop can't defend the knight on e5, but we can sacrifice, get the rook out of the way, and well, Leela considers this to be sufficient compensation for black. But again, you know, very, very sharp. So I think well worth examining this line. I had some difficulties finding something really convincing against the a6 line. So this line of Leela's is well worth investigating. Now there's another move order that's very interesting, and that's knight c3, after e6, knight c3, and then c6, which is the real triangle semi-Slav. That's the one that really gets Mr. Beads excited. So e3 again is Leela's main idea here, just heading back into the queen c2 Meran. e4, actually Leela plays exactly the same line as AlphaZero against Stockfish 8. So plays bishop e2, not knight e2, and then plays this bishop a5 maneuver, bishop c3, knight f3, knight h6. And there were many AlphaZero Stockfish 8 games. And actually AlphaZero didn't manage to make very much of this against Stockfish. Stockfish defended this beautifully, even just at version 8. Leela plays this quiet line, which I have seen before. Rook d8 is Leela's novelty. Rook a d8 was played in a correspondence game. I mean, white's a tiny bit better here. Probably, you know, slightly better pawn structure, but black's active, and knight may well come into d4. You know, no particular problems for black, really. It just seems like, you know, this Marshall Gambit e4, which was thought to be exceptionally dangerous for black, well, you need a lot of calculation, but still, you know, it just seems to have more or less been completely neutralized by the engines. Now, the other interesting idea is knight f3, when normally the engines just prefer knight f6, heading back into the normal Semi-Slav, but you can also play the Noteboom, which is named after Daniel Noteboom, a Dutch player of the 1930s, very talented, who died young of tuberculosis, I think. But you know, sometimes openings are named after players and they've never really played them. But yeah, Noteboom not only thought up this system, but really played a number of games that look very much like modern games in this line. So he was a real pioneer. There's a lovely book about his games with a foreword by Max Erver, you know, and which just shows he was obviously held in a lot of esteem and respect. So e3 b5, a4 bishop b4, bishop d2 a5. This is all standard stuff. Find it in all the theory books. This undermining move, it gains a pawn back, but black gets these a and b pawns. I mean, they're lovely positions to analyze. I mean, I had a very bad experience against Mihail Krasenkov, who's one of the big experts in this variation, where he managed to queen his a and b pawns, which wasn't really the idea. But it is very, very interesting. So I mean, knight bd7 has been played. I think we also had a game with this in the bonus as well. And all the engines are playing this line: knight d2 followed by bishop c2. You know, just covering e4 and c4 and preventing this pawn from moving. And then afterwards, you're going to try and in a perfect world, you'll go f4 and e4 and just clamp down on black's play there. Leela actually likes bishop e4, which I think something like this was played by Krasenkov against me, if I'm not mistaken. Bishop c2, knight bd7, c5, queen c7, knight d2 takes. And what white's aiming for really is to blockade these queenside pawns with the rook, get the rook to a1 and knight to c4. And black's normal plan is to play knight b8 to c6. That's normally the way that it goes. Here, actually, Leela decides that it doesn't need to do that it can just play with knight d7, h3, knight d5, knight c4, and f5. And I mean, this is I always found these positions very difficult to evaluate. White's really held black back. Black's not going to get any further with its pawns unless you're rather careless. But actually, advancing with white is quite tricky because moves like f3 and e4 are fraught with danger, as I found out against Krasenkov. So Leela gives this a 0.15 advantage, but not 100% clear at all. So there we are. That's Leela in the Slav and Semi-Slav. Some unexpected choices there, and some interesting ideas as well. So I'd definitely take a look at this one if you play with 1d4 against the Slav or Semi-Slav, because I think there's plenty to learn from this. All right, so that's the Slav and Semi-Slav. We'll be looking at other d4, d5 in the next video. See you there.